Hello. Today I'm visiting with Dr. Randy Nelson, Director of International Education, about his higher ed administrative position. What are your current responsibilities as Director of International Education?
I have a lot of responsibilities in this position. I think one of my largest responsibilities is working with students who are hoping to come into USF from other countries. We receive applications from people from all over the world, and there are a lot of different processes that they need to go through. One of my key responsibilities is to help them understand those processes and to make those processes manageable for them. Another really important responsibility I have involves SEVIS. SEVIS stands for the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, and it's under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security within the federal government. And so those responsibilities that I have with SEVIS are very important because we need to always know the regulations, we need to know the processes that one must follow in order to adhere to those regulations, and it also involves a significant piece of advisement for the international students so that I can help them stay in status and at the same time keep the school in compliance. That's a really key piece. I also help the international students through international student orientation so that attending school here at USF becomes a more comfortable experience. I also help people who are interested in study abroad follow the processes necessary for a successful experience in an international university. I oversee my strategic plan, I monitor a budget, and I also have a small staff that I need to supervise.
What are some less obvious dimensions about the position?
I think one of the less obvious dimensions of this position is the need to have a very sensitive level of intercultural awareness. We all have very thin layers of cultural experience that eventually form the lens through which we interpret nearly everything. The lens, for example, through which you're interpreting this interview and what I'm saying right now is different from that of someone who would come from China or India or Pakistan or any country I could name. We all see things and hear things and perceive things based on those multiple layers of cultural experiences that eventually form a lens through which we interpret everything. And I think a person in this position has to have a heightened awareness of those lenses. You can't always know, and you probably won't know, specifically what other people's lenses are. But it's important to know that those differences are always there, and they're very, very important. And that awareness, I believe, changes how a person in this position interacts with other people. I think that's a very important piece. I think in conjunction with that, it's important to understand the adjustment issues that international students will go through. All students coming to college for the first time will have some adjustment issues, but international students have their own unique set of experiences. One of those is many times they're dealing with a language that's not their native language. That creates additional stress. It does create a barrier. It creates in some people the sense that others will perceive them as not as intelligent as they really are. That's a really difficult piece for some of them. And also with issues of homesickness. Even if someone, let's say, comes from Chicago to attend USF, it is possible to get in the car on a long weekend and drive back to Chicago or take an airplane and be home in 90 minutes, that type of thing. But if you come from the other side of the globe, chances are you won't be going home for several months or perhaps a year at a time. And so the homesickness issues are a bit more profound for some of them. Another piece that I think is a real part of understanding this role is the socialization issues that some international students will face. And it goes back to the cultural lenses I talked about. International students, because their lenses are different from that of the typical Midwestern student, I might say, although our lenses are all probably different as well. but they will oftentimes, sometimes, I would say sometimes, have difficulty socializing. They are not sure how to read the social cues. Sometimes they don't read the social cues. Sometimes the social cues they believe they're sending, the signals they're sending, are not what they think they are, because the social cues, the sending and receiving thereof, all of that is deeply intertwined with the cultural lens. And so that piece becomes, for some international students, it becomes a really difficult piece. And so the other piece I think that goes along with that is international students also come with different perceptions of what to do with emotional struggles or even mental health issues. If, for example, you are from a particular country, I don't want to name any specific countries at this time, it may be considered really, really poor to go to someone to talk about your issues. Some countries believe that if you talk about your issues, that if you open up about what's really going on and what's perhaps troubling you, that you simply exacerbate those problems, intensify them, make them boil even harder, if you will. And they believe that the way to resolve serious emotional issues is to hold them way, way, way down deep inside. And most of us from the United States would probably say, I don't want to assume too much, but we would probably say that we've learned in this culture to vent our problems, and that it's good and it's okay, it's right to go to others for help with those issues. International students sometimes have lived their lives with another perspective on that. And so it's these kinds of things that a person in this position needs to understand, because the cultural shifts are multiple and they are complex, and an awareness of the incredible complexity there is important in working as wisely as you can with international students.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned SEVIS. Can you explain the responsibilities that you have within the SEVIS process?
Yeah, SEVIS is a very complex process. There are a lot of regulations that have to be followed, and with those regulations, as I said, there are processes. For example, I have every term, at the start of every term, I have to go into the SEVIS system and report that every student is here, every student is registered as a full-time student. I have to indicate the end date of the current term, the start date of the next term. That has to be done within a 30-day window from the start of the semester. If that is not done, the students are automatically terminated by the system. And so that becomes a very serious issue for students. That's one of the things that I have to do. I'm also responsible for keeping the school in compliance, making sure that our students are doing what they need to do, that our processes are such that they interface well with the SEVIS regulations. And so it's a very important part of my job.
Mm-hmm. What was your academic preparation leading to this position?
Well, my academic preparation probably began with my personal preparation in terms of coming to know people originally from Germany. My initial international interest stemmed from there, and I began to study the German language. And after I began studying that on my own, I eventually acquired a Bachelor of Arts degree in German, and eventually began traveling in Germany, eventually lived and worked there, actually taught in the public school system in Berlin. Those experiences were very useful, I think, and instrumental in preparing me for this position. I also myself studied abroad 2 different times. One summer I studied in Germany, and another summer I studied in Austria. I think those experiences were good. Eventually then I worked on my doctorate, and in my doctoral program I did some qualitative research in Germany, and then eventually wrote my dissertation on some of the psychological struggles that exchange students face in this country.
What leadership skills does a person need to effectively carry out the responsibilities in your position?
Yeah, I think one of the key pieces involving leadership is Number one, you have to have a genuine respect for diversity. I think people can tell when you say you respect diversity and then when you really deep inside mean it. I think people can definitely feel the difference there. I think you have to have a sensitivity to others' needs. And again, that goes back to the cultural lens piece that I talked about. I'm a believer, and this really doesn't have anything specifically to do with international education. It has everything to do with leadership. I am a strong proponent of transformational leadership. I'm a believer in helping other people achieve their maximum potential, helping other people believe in themselves, looking for what's good in people and saying to them, let's take something that's really good here. Here are things you're doing really well, and let's move that up from good to great. And then ask them as a servant leader, how can I help you get there? I think that is an important thing to remember. I think also it's important to listen, and to listen really carefully to people so that people feel that you have a vested interest in what they have to say and in perhaps some resolution to what their concerns may be. I believe that that's a very, very important piece. Another piece of leadership that I believe is important is to understand change and understand that, I think we need to understand that when you want to create change as an administrator, it's important first to have a deep understanding of the culture within which you're working. And by that, I'm probably meaning here more institutional culture, and working to make changes that are aligned with a vision and that have buy-in from those with whom you work, changes that happen slowly, changes that can easily be explained and justified. If someone should come to me and say, why are we making this change? There should be a very immediate answer that's based on logic and very clear direction, so that the change doesn't appear to be change just for the sake of change. Mm-hmm. And I think part of good leadership is understanding that people sometimes struggle with change. But when you think about it another way, everything that doesn't change dies. Everything has to change. And so it's learning how to create that change, to make that change happen in a correct sequence and probably at the right pace, so that it is not misunderstood by those who are affected by the change.
Mm-hmm. What are some major challenges that administrators face in your position?
I think in my position, one of the toughest parts is working with people who want to come to school here. And for a lot of different reasons, they're not able to do so. And they many times have a lot of drive. They have really strong aspirations. Their hopes are high. And for various reasons, sometimes they're not able to attend. And I think to interact with them, to work with them in such a way that they feel honored and respected, and that all of their hopes don't seem to be dashed because they are unable to come to school here. I think that's a difficult part of this job. I have seen it on more than one occasion when people really want to change their lives, and you know they're intelligent people and they're people that have their hearts in the right places. And you have to essentially counsel them away from the University of Sioux Falls because they're not, for a lot of reasons perhaps, not eligible to attend. And that's a challenge. It's hard, I would say, to, in a way, to break people's hearts when you have to share that news with them. Mm-hmm. I find that a challenge.
I'm sure it is. What advice do you have for future higher ed administrators?
Yeah, I think a key piece of being an administrator at any level is to be certain that you really look for and see the good and the value in those with whom you work. It goes back to my thoughts on transformational leadership. And I think this, at the end of the day, all of us have some basic needs. All of us need to be respected. We need to feel valued. We need to feel intelligent. We need to feel that our personal dignity always remains intact. And I think administrators who are really mindful of helping the people with whom they work to realize that those needs are really being met, genuinely met by the administrator. I think the administrator has a much better chance of getting the people in the organization not to work under you, but to walk alongside you toward the vision that you have for any institution or any department within that institution. It all goes back to understanding people. It all goes back to being fully and deeply respectful and mindful of others. I certainly believe it's the critical principle that underpins good administrative leadership.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else you'd like to share with our class today?
Well, I would just like to say that I think working in the field of leadership and administration in any school is a rich and rewarding experience. As John Steinbeck once said about educators, he said, educators are in the noblest of professions because our medium is the human mind and spirit. I've never forgotten that because I think it's true and I think it's right. And he believes that really great educators are like great artists for those reasons.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Nelson,
You're
for
welcome.
sharing your ideas about higher ed administration.
You're welcome.
And your experiences as Director of International Education.
Thanks, I've enjoyed this.
Thank you.